My name is Joseph, and this is Citizen U Chat. So today we're talking about voting and how people vote. Most people tend to vote by heuristics, a cognitive shortcut or like quick response. It's almost like a reaction. For example, if you were voting for specifically and only one party on the whole ticket, the whole ballot, you would just vote by that party, and that would be your heuristic. Or an example of another one is one of my professors told me that when women are elected to Congress and legislature, that they end up having a extreme change in the legislature that is being produced. Therefore, every time I see a ballot voting for a woman, that would be a heuristic. So other types of voting include stuff like retrospective voting. Retrospective voting would be looking back the past few years on the participation and the performance of the given legislature, and based on their performance, deciding to vote them in or not. So, speaking of voting and everything, so I was asked recently about how each party is trying to win the presidency. So here was one of the questions. NC is a battleground state and has voted Republican for 44 years straight until the Obama administration won in his presidential election in 2008. What do you think Biden would have to do to win North Carolina? So to go over some of these numbers, in 2008, Obama won by 115,000 votes. With a total of 2,123,390 votes. In 2012, Mitt Romney won in North Carolina with about 100,000 votes, with 2,275,000. And in 2016, the Republican Party won again, but this time by 170,000 votes. With the presidential election in North Carolina, the total amount of votes kept on rising, and so has the third party candidate votes. It was about 20,000 in 2008, it was about 40,000 in 2012, and in 2016 it was 120,000, which in the two previous elections was a margin big enough to decide the fate of North Carolina. So what the Democratic Party is attempting to do in this election is with this background information, the Democrats are hoping to capitalize on moderate Republican voters who are displeased with the performance in the past term, as well as attempting to appeal to the third-party voters under the guise of hoping that they too were displeased with the service by the president in the last term. In other words, the Democrats are hoping many people will decide to vote retrospectively against the Republican Party while trying to provide a moderate candidate that many people can compromise on. Which, however you feel about Joe Biden, he is very moderate in comparison to many of other possible Democratic candidates. So the next question that they posed was, following the previous question, what do you think Trump should do or not do to win NC as he did in 2016? So I thought that was an interesting question, since it implies that Trump's actions have actually influenced his approval ratings. Something that's been shocking about his term and the approval ratings is that they've been extremely consistent, except for a few points. They've only shifted like 4 points up or 2 down and stayed very consistent. The lowest it was, I think, was 38. The highest was like 44. But it has stayed in that range, which is like unheard of for a president to have that consistent of rating numbers. And to that end, what the Republican Party is hoping for is to have the same voting audience go out and vote, which was enough for him to get elected in 2016 by an almost unprecedented margin of 170,000 votes, which was unseen of in the previous election. So assuming Trump doesn't lose any Republican votes, even if the Democrats gain most of the third party votes, the voting public that's out there, they wouldn't have had enough. So when it comes to that, there needs to be a shift. So there's my little spiel on voting. So if you guys want to go out and vote, we are registering people and trying to help them register on ncstudentvote.org. One thing about this website is that in order to register online, you have to have a driver's license or a state-issued ID. Otherwise, you will have to submit a form to the Board of Elections. Another thing is you need to keep in mind of where you are on campus because they have a different address than you might think. The 911 address, for example, Cypress is 62 Braves Drive, or for Belk is 81 Faculty Row, North 105 Faculty Row, Pine 139 Faculty Row, and Oak is 287 Faculty Row. The Village and Courtyard apartments have way more possible numbers, and even with that, you're supposed to put your room number and suite when you are filling out the ballot. So, how do you check out and look up your sample ballot? I tend to use the website Ballotopedia. It is extremely useful, and you can just input your address and it will show you all the races that are currently going on. So to go through the races in District 9, what we are currently in, if you're curious what the 9 part of it, we are split into, I think it's 18 districts, and it separates us for the House of Representatives seat. So we are voting in the 8th House of Representatives seat in North Carolina. Okay, so we also have a Senate race this year that is between Tom Tillis, Republican Party, Cal Cunningham, Democrat, Kevin E. Hayes, Constitution Party, and Sharon Bray, Libertarian Party. The Governor of North Carolina race is between Roy Cooper, the incumbent, Democratic Party, Dan Forest, Republican Party, Al from the Constitution Party, and Steve from the Libertarian Party. I apologize, I would rather not butcher those names. Everyone knows who's going for the presidency: Donald Trump, the incumbent, Republican Party, Joe Biden, the Democratic Party, Don Blankenship, the Constitution Party, Howie Hawkins, the Green Party, and Joe Jorgensen, the Libertarian Party. So for Congress, for our District 9 is between Dan Bishop and Cynthia Wallace. Dan Bishop is the incumbent. He is from the Republican Party, and Cynthia Wallace is the Democrat running for that. So our statewide offices: North Carolina Commission of Labor, Jessica Holmes, the Democratic Party, and Joshua Dorbson from the Republican Party. Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina, Yvonne Lewis Hawley, Democratic Party, Mark Robinson, Republican Party. Attorney General of North Carolina, Josh Stein, the incumbent, and Jim O'Neill, Republican Party. North Carolina Secretary of State, Elena Marshall, the incumbent, Democratic Party, and E.C. Skays, Republican Party. North Carolina Treasurer, Dale Fowell, the incumbent, Republican Party, and Ronnie Chatterjee, Chatterjei, Democratic Party. North Carolina Superintendent of Public Instruction, Jen Mayram, Democratic Party, Kathy Truitt, Republican Party. North Carolina State Auditor, Beth Wood, the incumbent, Democratic Party, or Tony Wayne Street, Republican Party. North Carolina Commissioner of Agriculture, Steve Troxler, the incumbent, Republican Party, and Jenna Wadesworth, Democratic Party. North Carolina Commissioner of Insurance, Mike Cossey, incumbent, Republican Party, Wayne Goodwin, Democratic Party. North Carolina Supreme Court seat 1, Chief Justice, Jerry Beasley, the incumbent, and Paul Martin Newby, Republican. There are 18 total seats, I think, up for in North Carolina. So it's kind of a lot to go through. North Carolina Supreme Court seat 2, Lucy Inman and Phil Berger Jr. Phil Berger Jr. is the Republican, and Lucy Inman is the Democratic candidate. North Carolina Supreme Court seat 4, Mark A. Davis, incumbent. Tamara Barringer, Republican Party. Mark A. Davis is the Democratic incumbent. North Carolina Court of Appeals, seat 13, Chris Brooke, incumbent, Democratic Party, and Jeff Griffin, Republican Party. North Carolina Court of Appeals, Bryan seat 4, Tricia Shields and April C. Wood, Republican Party. Tricia Shields is the Democratic Party. It is way less common for you to find a third-party candidate running for local seats because it's harder for people to recognize, and when they're from a party that you can't recognize, they tend to not have any votes and not draw any voters. If you were curious about that. North Carolina Court of Appeals, seat 6, Chris Dillon and Gray Strays. Gray Strays is the Democratic Party. Chris Dillon is the Republican Party, the Republican incumbent, my bad. North Carolina Court of Appeals, seat 5, Laura Cabbage, Democratic Party, Willie Fred Gore, a Republican Party. North Carolina Court of Appeals, seat 7, Reuben Young, the incumbent, Democratic Party, Jeffrey Carpenter, Republican Party. Okay. North Carolina State Senate, District 13. I believe we are in District 13 for the State Senate. Is Danny Earl Britt, the incumbent Republican Party, versus Barbara Yates Lockamy, Democratic Party. North Carolina House of Representatives, District 47, is between Charles Graham, the incumbent Democratic Party, and Olivia Oxendine, Republican Party. And that is everyone currently on our ballot. If you are set to be registered if you are registered at the address of on campus. If you are registered anywhere else, for example, at a home address, I suggest you go and check your ballot, look up your ballots. You can use the website ballotpedia.org. It's very useful, has many resources that you can use. We also have just some information about how and where you can vote. Again, it would be very useful if you register there online, since you can do that, and unless you do not have a driver's license or a state ID. So lastly, to get you guys prepared for voting, there are no voter ID laws, so you don't have to worry if you don't have an ID going up to the ballot. You should be able to just register, and they should have enough information by the time it takes to register. So, good news there. And I think that is it. That is me for Citizens U Chat.